to Messari's Unqualified Opinions. This is episode number 30-something. I've lost counts. Really excited today to talk to a friend of mine, Dave Balter, who's the founder and CEO of Flipside Crypto, which is working on asset ratings and market intelligence solutions for the crypto industry and trying to at least create some more common sense benchmarks. I want to thank our sponsors for the podcast, Token Tax and Token Soft. Token Tax, you got one more week to do your taxes or file extensions, so get on it, guys. But we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation, I think, on industry data, on the quality of projects, and a number of other things. But before we get into Dave's background, because he's a serial entrepreneur and one of the more impressive folks in the industry, and we work closely with his team, I have to start by yelling at him because Tron, according to Flipside, has the same letter grade in terms of a rating as our beloved Bitcoin. So Dave, you should be ashamed of yourself. I want to welcome you to the podcast with a public shaming.
Is it a meeting of some sort?
So we'll get into that, but I just wanted to kind of lay that out there that we very much do not appreciate.
We can talk through why that is.
We will.
Okay.
But before we get into the meat and potatoes of that and what you guys do and how you've thought about this FCAS score, walk through the journey, because this is your first crypto startup, but you've had a number of successful historical startups. Yeah. What got you to tackle this problem, and what was your journey to this point?
Yeah, so this is startup number 7 for me, which is wonderful. I ran a company from 2001 through 2010 called Buzz Agent, which was a word-of-mouth marketing agency. We sold that to Tesco in 2010. And probably the real instigation for this business started in 2010. We built a business called Smarter, which was a machine learning skills assessments business, very crazy data tools that help people evaluate their skills in 10 questions. We sold that in 2014 to Pluralsight. The key there is the same team that was building some of those tools began building Flipside. What led us here was like many in the space, we began tinkering with crypto, wanted to buy it. The data that was out there about how to buy it was pretty nascent and not so good. And so we called one of our buddies at Smarter, who's a data scientist, and said, what do you got that could help us actually build our own investment models? He had happened to have a swing trading algorithm for hedge funds, they rebuilt it with crypto historicals, gave it to us, we began trading, and we realized the big aha was, if you're investing in the space on price alone, you're missing the components that actually evaluate whether these are businesses and whether they are succeeding. And so we began building tools to solve that. We started tracking actual customer activity. We started tracking developer behavior. We realized, we raised a fund, we did a bunch of stuff, and then we realized this data is way too valuable to use just for investing. How can we help the industry and projects use this data to rate the assets? So that kicked us off. Yeah.
And the rating system initially was, your initial target was the investors themselves. That's right. It seems like there's been a little bit of a shift, maybe temporary, maybe long-term in focus to actually directly work with the projects themselves.
So that's not going to go away. That doesn't mean we left the investors behind, but that doesn't go away.
Well, some of the investors just got left behind because many are out of business now.
Well, there you go. Right, that's right. Yeah. The good ones are still hanging around, but so I'd say the rationale is basically this: we rate 2 things more than anything else. And maybe let's back up. If you're listening to a quarterly earnings call for Apple, they're going to say something like, this year, this quarter we did 1.4 billion installs of Apple devices. We raised our customer growth rate by X%. We're releasing these products over this period of time, and this is our expectations for those. Okay? If you listen to a typical crypto earnings call, however that occurs in this space, it's like, here's what our market cap was and here's our price, but there has been illogical lack of information about, like, is this company growing? Okay? And so we really analyze these 2 things. We analyze the customer activity rate, the retention rate, the segmentation rate, all the things that you need to grow and run a business. And then we have 30 data points that we measure across all open source repositories to measure developer behavior, which is an indication of product. Okay? those two things certainly can help investors, and we have a whole bunch of tools that they can use to understand the fundamentals. But projects themselves, we got to a point where we realized the projects are in dire need of how do I run my company, right? And so we began building a suite of services that.
You mean how do I run my decentralized network that did not sell a security?
So this has been a debate. Okay, Are these businesses? Are they companies? Are they protocols? Are they whatever? I don't know a single. There is no. I don't care how.
You're a customer entity.
Yes, you're an entity. We'll use entity. That's probably the nice approach. Like you're an entity, but you have to have customers. Nothing works if you don't have some way to retain revenue through your. There's nothing works without revenue. So you can't succeed on operational efficiency alone or building cool technology. You got to build something. So we realized many of these, unfortunately, many of these folks started building tools to create cool entities, cool whatever, but then said, oh my gosh, I got to run this thing. And we happen to have insights to help them run their business, or their entity, or their decentralized whatever. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the scoring system. We won't name any names, but after the CoinMarketCap announcements, there were a number of folks on Twitter that did not take kindly to some of your ratings and rankings. Right? We'll keep that offline.
What does it rhyme? Okay, go ahead.
You're the one that took all the heat and all the fire. So, but EOS and Ethereum were rated the highest. Bitcoin, Tron, 0x, a couple of others, wildly different, right, in terms of reputation, in terms of perceptions around how those protocols capture value, all got the next closest score. So walk through the components to that scoring system that you've come up with, how you started the rough estimate, because it is just a benchmark. It's imprecise now, but I'm sure it will evolve over time. So how have you thought about that, and when to actually flip the switch on when to label something with a letter or a number? Because you felt good enough about the quality of the benchmark.
Yeah, it is precisely imprecise. That is what we'll say. It's
a starting point.
No,
right? So Scott Adams would call it the bad idea.
It is actually quite precise, and we would stand by any of the ratings we have out there, and we would love to talk with anyone who wants to debate them. But our system, a few things. It is entirely quantitative. I cannot go in and say like, ooh, I kind of like Tron or EOS more than another one. It is what it is based on the data that is available in the market. There are three things that go into FCAS, Fundamental Crypto Asset Score. That's what it stands for. The two biggest components are user activity, that is designed by ingesting all blockchain transaction data, wallet calls, smart contract calls, wallet address movement, everything. The IP against that is we label every address based on pattern of movement, so we know what is a speculative activity, we know what mixers are doing, we know how certain people behave in certain ways, and we know when actual customers are transacting. That informs a user activity rating. Okay, every rating's on a 0 to 1,000 point scale, so if, I don't know Tron's exact rating, but if it's 800, that's pretty good, okay, let's say. Okay, the second is a component of developer behavior. Again, that's like product. There are 30 components in there. It is not how many commits happened, anything quite like that. It's much deeper. There are factors between them, and it's really looking at, can this organization create product and deploy it in a way that would actually lead to success. Those two things, that's 95% of FCAS. The last component, which is less than 5%, is called market maturity. It is that initial trading algorithm we ran to invest ourselves. It basically is a measurement of volatility, risk, liquidity pools. We call it the rudder. Speculation still impacts these assets, and so you need sort of that rudder inside of that. Those three algorithms, which are comprised of thousands of variables, roll up into a single score that's called FCAS. 0 to 1,000 point scale, the bands within those create the letter grades. So if you're in the very, very top band, you're a superb. Right below that's A, B, C, and F. For those that are Fs, that's fragile. Doesn't mean they're failing. They're just fragile because they're.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
It's just it helps people understand what it means in the grand scheme. But so that's what FCAS is, and we produce it. You said Tron over Bitcoin. I can't tell you I like Tron more than Bitcoin. I can just tell you that's what the data shows. They have more customer activity and a better developer behavior profile right now, maybe than Bitcoin does. Right? The last thing, and this is super important, like we get called by projects, hey, my Telegram community is huge, right? Like I got more chatter than anyone. We don't pay attention to sentiment because so much of it is gamed and like it's not a real attribute yet of a company defined by how it would lead to success, or an entity, how it would lead to success. So we don't pay attention to the noise, we pay attention to the facts of, is this a business?
And if anything, you would expect that sentiment, a derivative of sentiment should be developer activity or on-chain usage anyway, right?
Yeah, so we have like...
If people are talking about this legitimately and evangelizing, that will lead to these other inputs.
And if they are evangelizing and it's not, then your evangelizing is a waste of time, right? All it is shouting into the wind. It's not going to go, like, come on, let's think about any other world you live in that, you know, put it to good use. The good use should be that people begin to create a groundswell that gets other people to pay attention and use the project. When that happens, all the numbers look up.
And if you overfit for that, there's a chance that you start ranking things more highly at exactly the wrong time.
There you go.
Because of the pump and dump nature of the industry and some of the things that we saw in 2017.
It is a life cycle. We look at it like developer behavior is building, user activity is the beginning of actually like what happens when you build a great product, and then market maturity is now people can speculate effectively. You are correct. In that early developer day, maybe even before it, some of that sort of shouting can be helpful in getting maybe the right developers to pay attention, to build, to lead towards user activity. So that is possible. We just start a little further up the chain.
Yep. How does that evolve over time, right? So right now, it seems like that's a pretty solid foundation, but you can look at a protocol like Bitcoin and 0x, which are right next to each other. We'll forget about Tron because everybody likes to use that as a punchline and like a punching bag.
Okay.
But 0x, really well respected team. Bitcoin, I think in the FCAS ratings, I think they're 4 and 5 right now, or 3 and 5 or something like that. Same letter rating.
Yeah.
You would be hard pressed to find someone that would argue 0x has anything close to Bitcoin in terms of product market fit, figuring out value capture for the token, right? So the protocol is used, the tech that's being built is used by many, many different teams in the industry, but even the 0x team will tell you they don't necessarily have a stranglehold on exactly how this token will accrue value over time. Bitcoin, on the other hand, has proven to be money-like in many of its attributes. So how do you frame this for investors or anyone else that's looking at this as if it is a debt rating? Because that could be the temptation to look at this and see, oh, this is kind of like my FICO score. It's FCAS instead of FICO. It's the Flipside rating instead of like the S&P rating. That implies a certain rubber stamp of financial health, aside from the inputs, which are decidedly not financial in nature.
Right. So that's the most important part. There is not enough cash flow in any of these companies to build a Moody's-like credit rating score. Okay, and we all know that will certainly be componentized as that happens in this space. And we do believe over the next few years, users will turn into revenue. And there are some that are getting the revenue, but like for the most part, that's what needs to begin to occur. And when that happens, you can do more credit rating type of definition. Okay. I would try to not think of this as black and white as the industry maybe previously thought of this, which is well, Bitcoin's been around forever. It's got the greatest, let's say maybe the greatest fundamental technology. 0x hasn't figured out their business yet. Right now, they're sort of working in the same patterns and the same streams that would make them equal in their behavior profiles. Now, that doesn't mean Bitcoin's going to succeed or 0x is going to succeed one over the other. It means that right now, if you're investing, you should be thinking about these things maybe in a similar way. But more importantly, if you're the project as your 0x, you're like, okay, I'm doing the work. I am heavy lifting in a way that maybe something as good as Bitcoin is doing. Okay. I would also argue, and we'll come back to like what's next. I would also argue, I love Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin probably will win in many ways. there's a pretty good chance they don't. I mean, look at Alta Vista and Google, like, you know, who knows, right? So right now I go, it's hard to see that, but I can tell you the data would show that these two things are starting to behave in slightly similar patterns. The thing that is changing is that there's so much second layer protocol behavior going on that data, it doesn't make sense to do all the transactions on chain. That data will begin to transform how we think about the rating. What's happening off chain, what's happening in second level protocols, et cetera.
Yep. That might be an opportunity though, because if some of these protocols become anchor protocols, then hypothetically they'd start to develop more of a fee market, right?
Yes.
Because you'd have to pay fees to actually settle on chain.
Yeah.
On that value capture note, Nick Carter had an excellent thread last week, I think, on Mastercoin and a history lesson that I think people can look at with Mastercoin. Yeah. Mastercoin was maybe the initial ICO back in 2013. Early investors made oodles of money. It's now known as Omni, and Omni is a $2 million protocol.
Yep.
Yet, MadeSafeCoin and Tether are built on top of Omni.
Cool.
And Omni has not captured any of that value. Tether has processed over 100 billion in transactions and transfers, regardless of whether you think it's fully reserved or you know, I don't want to get into any of the conspiracy theories, but no matter how you slice it, that type of activity has happened, and yet the technology that undergirds that has captured zero value.
Well, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells us that there's no business. But what is missing there, right? If you think about throughput, then Omni hypothetically, I would think would look pretty good from what it has enabled in terms of transaction volume on chain.
But they don't have customers. You're saying because they threw off the other technology that those people learned to define by creating customers?
Sure, but would that be excluded in the FCAS calculations? Because
I don't know enough to know, but probably in the way we think of each of these as separate organizations. So we'd probably say, well, those activities belong to MadeSafe, they don't belong to Omni, right? So it sounds to me like Mastercoin and Omni made a pretty critical business mistake, which is they let their IP, which is how do we get customers to engage, get into the hands of elsewhere, and they had two choices. One choice, this is like general business principles, one choice is to take enough ownership of that parent, the one that's going to create customers, that they win when they win, or they hold it on to it themselves. And what it sounds like they did is they said, this is awesome, hey, why don't you guys go build businesses and we'll be over here like hanging around and doing cool stuff. That's a problem for this industry. Like you can't hey everybody, you can't just build cool stuff and then hope your way to a strategy of success. Like you have to run a company, go run a company. Don't give away your IP.
I mean, well, that is somewhat controversial, right?
Why?
We're in an open source industry, right?
So I understand.
Look, you and I know that, right? But I don't necessarily know. Is it truly that zero sum for some of the open source protocol tokens? Because this is going to play out and be a major trend over the next couple of years, and you guys should hypothetically be able to measure some of this activity between Cosmos and Polkadot and Parachains and Ethereum versus EOS and even Tron, right?
But open source doesn't mean you give it away and everyone else can make money but you don't. There are lots of ways to open source your product. Look at Linux, right? There's lots of ways to create open source philosophies and standards that doesn't let you lose when everyone else wins. Like, don't confuse those two. I love decentralization, I love open sourcing, but like, be a business.
Well,
I don't know how else to argue it.
Yeah, no, look, I understand that, and in many ways I agree with it, but I guess the question is, what you just said is, to use 0x as an example, right? Yeah. If the 0x protocols were developed by 0x, and then they had a Red Hat-like business where they were consulting and helping spin up new operations, right? That's awesome. One way to do things.
Awesome, yeah.
But what that implies is that the 0x team, by adopting that Red Hat model, has essentially said the token doesn't really matter.
And it may be the case in the longest of runs if this industry is to survive. I don't know. I hope the tokens matter. I hope all of that happens. But to survive, they're going to have to come up with a conclusion like that. They're going to get beyond the I can just raise money to build cool tech and have this great idea that I just give it away and then it's just going to it's going to happen. They're going to have to come up with something, And I don't know the answer yet. It might be something we haven't seen about how they do that maintains the token and lets them do the red hat type of thing. I don't know. But all of that has to play together, or else they won't exist. Or maybe the code exists, but them as people running the code, they won't exist.
Are you, as you think about framing FCAS, then is it a rating on protocol quality versus the asset? Because it is the Flipside crypto asset score, which implies that it is more about the token. Maybe that's just shorthand, but is it really more about the protocol then?
Today it is, those two are infinitely associated. I mean, is it about the protocol? I try to not distinguish between the two, but I would say, to your question about evolution, it may become that those begin to diverge at some point, and maybe it's FCPS doesn't sound as good, so we'll keep it FCAS. We'll work on that. I got to work on that. But today those are intrinsically linked, and when they start to separate, we'll measure how those begin to separate.
And there is that third bucket, which is very underweight, but it is part of the FCAS score now, which is market sentiment, market maturity, right? So that in that view of the world, if these two decouple, you might change the
that
weighting
might become
system.
Stronger, right? So here's how market maturity works. We run 40 efficient market trading strategies against an asset. So we look at every day's price. We have it in the past, and we ask, for the next day, could that predict the next day's price on how many of those efficient trading strategies, seasonality, momentum, all that fun stuff. The ones that can predict the most are more mature. And the reason this is important is because right now, crypto is still an inefficient market. And so so it's really hard to invest effectively, but those that become more efficient, that represents ones that investors, really sophisticated investors, can run their traditional trading strategies and understand how to monetize the market. The more that happens, the more safe ground there is for investors. The more safe ground for investors, the more a company gets supported, et cetera. And yes, that could create a lift in the market maturity score if that begins to happen.
Where does 2019 take you guys? What's next on the rollout schedule? Because behind the scenes, I've gotten a peek at something. So there's some questions I'm not going to ask because I don't know what's public, and it's tough for me to filter the two. So what's next on the roadmap? What are you excited about? Anything coming out that's new and exciting?
So I'd say most people don't or haven't gotten a look at, but we have a whole suite of analytics tools for the projects themselves. So we believe our job in the industry is to help create insights and exposure that allows people to understand these as businesses. And most importantly is, how do we help these projects get over the hump of, I created something interesting, now it has to grow. And so there is a suite of analytics tools. If you're a project, the actually core tool is free. You can see your FCAS, you can see all of its subcomponents, trend over time, historicals, and then we have a whole bunch of traditional segmentation and retention modules. We can tell you, these are your customers, this is how they're behaving, this is what they're doing, this is what they're not doing, and maybe use those tools in order to help grow and accelerate your business. And so that's out there. A lot of people haven't seen it yet, but it's being used by quite a few projects.
And it is good looking. So I've seen it, and super excited about it. In the next couple of weeks, you will see Flipside ratings on our on-chain FX dashboard. We're excited to roll that out, and we'll continue to add more features and columns and different inputs. But a lot that we can do, I think. Argue, if you will, about the results of the data, but numbers don't lie. Those
out there who know, you know who you are. You can argue all you want. You can argue all you want. Do it in person. Let's have that discussion.
Oh man!
Come on.
Now,
let's go.
Ending with some fire. That's got to be the promo. Zach's going to edit that, and we're going to make this a fire episode that everybody comes back for.
Okay.
Dave Balter at Flipside Crypto, very smart guy that's done this before in data science and analytics generally, and trying to bring a little bit more sanity to crypto, much like we are at Messari. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. Peace.